your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for a look back at Alberta this week. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has recently come under fire for saying she will only be taking one question from media moving forward. But when she attended a luncheon at the Sandman Signature Hotel in Lethbridge last Monday, she didn't take any questions at all from the media. The event was hosted by the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. Chamber CEO Cindy Bester said it was important for the Premier to visit the region to discuss how the province will continue to support small businesses, not just now, but in the future.
We are economic drivers, and it takes a community to drive the economy. But business, we have the opportunity to grow and to expand with new labor force, with new innovation. And I think it's just really important to keep in mind that we have the energy, we've got the connections with post-secondary, with our partnerships with the government, so we can move things fast.
Premier Smith took no on-camera media questions later that same day either during Nathan Newdorf's official campaign launch. Now, in response to the Premier's visit to Lethbridge and not taking any questions from the media, Lethbridge West candidate Shannon Phillips reacted to the UCP's new media policy change, saying that change is cowardly.
It takes voters for granted here in Lethbridge and throughout southern Alberta. The way that we speak to the public is via the media, and we need to always be accountable. I know I learned all of those skills from watching my leader, Rachel Notley.
And running up against Phillips in this next election, Cheryl Seaborn is the new UCP Lethbridge West candidate, following controversy from the previous candidate, Tori Tanner, who stepped down. Tanner accused Lethbridge teachers of showing pornography to students and subsequently resigned following a video of her making the claim on social media. Now, Seaborn, on the other hand, is a registered nurse, a University of Lethbridge alumna, and a recent recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal for her work with the Kainai Nation. She will be going head-to-head with NDP Lethbridge West candidate Shannon Phillips. We asked Seaborn what it will take to dethrone the incumbent Phillips.
She's a formidable opponent, there's no question about it. I think that people, though, in Lethbridge West would like to see a positive change. I am certainly receiving that feedback. That's what I'm working with as I move forward, is that, I will return your phone calls. I will be in my office to hear what you have to say. It doesn't matter to me who you voted for. I'm there to listen to everyone. I'm there to listen to the needs of the residents of Lethbridge West, and I think that there is just a hunger for that to happen. I need to get out and meet people, and that's what I've been doing, and responding to the inquiries and the concerns that people are expressing.
As part of her campaign, Seaborn says she's also focusing on healthcare, tackling crime, and strengthening the economic opportunities for business owners in Lethbridge West. Alberta's official opposition says the company that provides community lab services in Alberta is drastically understaffed. The NDP says DynaLife currently has 200 empty positions. Staff have apparently also walked away from bargaining with some of their employees. Alberta NDP Health Critic David Shepherd says healthcare in our province is still in crisis.
Albertans like one man with reduced kidney function who needs to have his blood drawn and monitored regularly, but is facing a 3-week wait. Or the patient who waited 6 weeks for an appointment and arrived to find a waiting room packed well over capacity, posing concerns about both viral transmission and fire safety. That Albertans are waiting weeks and, yes, sometimes months to get basic blood work done is another clear and disastrous result of the UCP's mishandling of our healthcare system.
The Alberta government announced new funding to support Albertans with developmental disabilities. Seniors, Community and Social Services Minister Jeremy Nixon says $240 million will be going to support the Persons with Developmental Disabilities waitlist.
This funding will go into Alberta's disability sector to help connect more individuals with support, bring more staff online, and address the challenges that we are seeing here today. In fact, we're anticipating that around 500 individuals who have been waiting for services will be able to access supports within the first year. We are so grateful for the collaboration that we have had with the disability service providers like IRSA and so many others across this province that do incredible work.
Coming up after the break, we look more closely at Canada's historical federal workers' strike and how it affects all Canadians. Keep it right here. Canada is experiencing one of the largest strike actions in the country's history, and it's going to affect nearly every Canadian. 155,000 federal workers walked off the job at more than 250 locations across Canada this week. It's part of a job action by the Public Service Alliance of Canada. The walkout began Wednesday after bargaining groups failed to come to an agreement over a few sticking points, including wages. PSAC's national president, Chris Aylward, spoke to a crowd of striking federal workers in Ottawa. He said, enough's enough.
When this government suppresses wages for its own employees, what they're doing is suppressing wages for every single worker in this country, and we're going to say we're not going to do it.
There's a lot of solidarity. People are in good spirits. It's obviously the first day of the protest, of the strike. Workers are talking about how many of them are really low paid. These are some of the workers that, when you think of public sector unions, people don't realize there's a lot of workers that are not actually very well paid, that have not had raises for a while and have not been able to keep up with inflation.
This staff will obviously affect Canadians who can now expect delays with filing their taxes, applying for employment insurance, immigration, or even a passport. The bargaining groups include 35,000 Canada Revenue Agency staffers and about 46,000 essential workers who are not part of the strike action. And some of you might be wondering how you'll receive your tax refund in a timely manner or how the strike could impact border crossings. Angela Stewart has those details.
Thursday saw many back on the picket lines here in Lethbridge for what is being called the biggest strike in Canadian history. Outside of the Service Canada building, employees with the Public Service Alliance of Canada continue to fight for a fair deal.
We've had great turnout, great participation, great energy from the members. You know, we're actually having a good time making the best of a bad situation. More than 155,000 workers across the country have been on strike since Wednesday after contract talks fell short and a deal was not met by the April 18th deadline. The employees that work for Canada Revenue Agency were in collective bargaining for 2 years and the employer never put a wage offer on the table. The strike, although happening in the middle of tax season, specialists with H&R Block Canada anticipate the only impacts would be the calculations of benefits and credits in the future.
For example, GST or the incentive, climate incentive, or even old age pensions, but that's yet to be determined. As of right now, it's business as usual.
Workers who are on strike make up about 17.6% of the Canada Border Service Agency employees. In a statement, the agency says they do not provide direct frontline operational services like processing travelers and commercial goods. Services to travelers and businesses will be maintained. Back at the strike, the union would also like to see proper work-life balance, job security, and remote work be negotiated. Well, the group isn't sure how long they will be on strike for, but they hope their employer will be able to come to the bargaining table with a proper collective agreement. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
In Calgary, Conservative MP Stephanie Kuzy asked the Prime Minister why the Liberals have been unable to get a deal to avoid this massive public service strike. The PM responded saying his government supports the unionized workers.
Since 2015, this Prime Minister has spent $21 billion more on the public service and $22 billion on outside consultants. And yet he wasn't capable of negotiating an agreement with the public service. Mr. Speaker, will this Prime Minister take responsibility and apologize not only to the public service, but to Canadians for failing to reach a negotiation?
We know all too well what the Conservative playbook would be on this. Back to work legislation even before the picket lines were brought up. That's what they've done before. That's their go-to on this. On this side of the House, we actually respect and work with unions as partners. We respect the right to collective bargaining. We have been at the table working constructively. They continue to be at the the table right now.
And federal ministers provided an update on the ongoing bargaining efforts with the union, along with strike-related labor disruptions.
The government has offered PSAC employees a wage increase of 9% over 3 years. This fully matches the increase recommended by the Public Interest Commission. And all members of the commission endorsed that increase, including the PSAC's nominee. We have also put forward proposals on a number of other priorities for the PSAC, including remote work, increased shift and weekend premiums, and improved leave with pay for family-related responsibilities.
Coming up, federal workers don't have everyone's support. Find out how the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is reacting after the break. Welcome back. As we focus on the federal strike, there are some who are taking issue with what the federal workers are asking for. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on the Trudeau government to reject what it calls the unaffordable and unsustainable demands put forth by the union. To discuss this in more detail is Federal Director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, who joined Hal Roberts from Ottawa.
Franco, according to the Treasury Board of Canada, PSAC or PSAC is demanding a lot of compensation increases over the next 3 years, which would cost taxpayers how much?
$9.3 billion. Can you believe that, folks? They are demanding up to 47% compensation increase over 3 years, costing struggling taxpayers $9.3 billion. It's unaffordable, it's unfair, it's unsustainable, and the government needs to say, enough is enough, no way.
Now, didn't federal employees already receive a raise during the pandemic?
Oh, they sure did. More than 90% of federal bureaucrats received at least one raise during the pandemic. 312,000 federal government employees received a raise. Not only that, the federal government dished out more than $500 million in bonuses during the pandemic.
Franco, what are some of the non-wage benefits the union is demanding?
Well, I think if most Canadians went to their boss and asked for some of these benefits, we'd be laughed out of the office. They want more pay for staying in the office past 4 p.m. They want taxpayer contributions into a union-controlled social justice fund, which engages in, quote, advocacy for public policy. Which engages in advocacy for progressive public policy. They want an education fund up to $17,000 for laid-off employees. They want paid time off up to 2 weeks. They want 4 weeks of vacation after only working for 4 years. And they want overtime paid at double time. So some of these demands are completely unreasonable, they're unfair, and they're unaffordable.
So how will this strike really affect the average Canadian?
Well, the big one is the big tax bill if the government gives in to the union negotiators' demands. But also, let's not forget that almost since day one, the implied threat from the union negotiators of the tax bureaucrats has been taxpayers pay up more money that you don't have and can't afford, or you might not get your own money back at tax refund time. Hal, I think quite simply, that's cruel.
Thanks so much, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa.
And speaking of strikes, it looks like not just getting a passport, but also catching a flight could become challenging in the coming days. The union representing WestJet pilots says they have voted in favor of strike action. The Airline Pilots Association says the 1,600 WestJet pilots it represents can launch strike action as early as the week leading up into the May long weekend, which usually kicks off the summer travel season. The head of the union's WestJet contingent, Bernie Lewell, says the workers' issues revolve around job protection, pay, and scheduling at the airline and its discount subsidiary, Swoop. Lewell says he and his team are frustrated with WestJet right now.
Negotiations started with WestJet management on September 2nd of last year. It's been roughly 7 or 8 months here, and the progress just isn't where it needs to be. So with that in mind, 2 weeks ago, we initiated a strike authorization ballot, which will give the Master Executive Council the ability to to authorize a strike down the line. The results came in today. 95% of our pilots voted. Of those that voted, 93% voted in favor. So that gives us a resounding mandate that we can now take to the company and see if they will come back to the negotiating table and just negotiate with us in good faith. That's what we're asking for.
Lowell says talks continue until April 24th, followed by a 3-week cooling off period unless both parties agree to extend negotiations. And focusing our attention away from strike actions, here's something you don't hear every day. An Elantra goes to school. Turns out the car drove through a community school in the First Nations settlement of Morley, Alberta. Cochrane RCMP say a man drove his Hyundai Elantra through the east side entrance of the school, causing more than $150,000 in damage. Closed circuit TV shows the car being driven down several hallways, causing extensive damage. The vehicle was later located and seized, and the driver was arrested. No other information has been released by the RCMP as the investigation is still ongoing. Up next, an Alberta RCMP officer is laid to rest. A plan to get class sizes under control and a proposal to reduce emissions. Keep it right here. The regimental funeral for the Alberta RCMP officer who died over a week ago took place in Sherwood Park Thursday. Constable Harvinder Singh Dhami, a member of the Strathcona County Detachment east of Edmonton, died while driving to assist his colleagues with a noise complaint. RCMP said Dhami's vehicle hit a large concrete barrier on the road northeast of Sherwood Park in the early hours of April the 10th. A funeral procession took place at the Bethel Lutheran Church in Sherwood Park and ended at the Millennial Place Recreation Center, where a private service was held. And in other news, as part of Budget 2023, funding has been set aside for 4 school projects, including a much-needed gymnasium upgrade in Lethbridge. Wednesday's funding announcement coincided with the Alberta government investing millions into different infrastructure projects around the province. Angela Stewart has that story.
It's a much-needed upgrade for École La Vallendrée. A funding announcement Wednesday from the Alberta government and the City of Lethbridge will see an expansion of the school's gymnasium in the coming years.
This gymnasium has been one that's been on the list for many years.
Through the province's capital plan, this expansion is among many other infrastructure projects the Alberta government is investing in.
$377 million over 3 years to build 58 new school projects, including several projects right here in Lethbridge.
The city is investing $500,000 into the build. Mayor Blaine Higgins says he's excited to see this plan finally come to fruition, as it will help continue to grow the city's community.
The work that has been done by this community and its community as a whole has been second to none. And this gymnasium has been something we've been working on for quite some time. And so when that opportunity came and the province came to the table with the funding they did in this budget, and with our $500,000 as well to go towards the expansion, we're going to see it.
Construction will see the area be more than doubled in size, allowing more room for spectators.
Entrance and egress for safety would be a key consideration, as well as space for parents and spectators for the sports. It would most certainly have another court.
As this expansion is still in its planning phase, Neudorf suspects the entire project could take anywhere up to 2 to 3 years to complete, totaling $4.5 million in funding. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Some of the other Lethbridge projects include a new K-6 school on the west side and the modernization of Galbraith Elementary School. Alberta's official opposition says they have a plan to hire more teachers to get class sizes under control. Education critic Sarah Hoffman says should her party form government next month, they would reverse the cuts she says the UCP made to education.
Because of the damage done by Danielle Smith and the UCP, classrooms are harder to teach in and they're harder to learn in. There are more kids credited into each classroom. Danielle Smith has refused to build new schools and growing communities around our province. And we are short teachers. So let's have a look at just how desperately short we are of those teachers who make such a difference in students' lives. In 2019, The number of students, this is when Rachel Notley was the Premier, the number of students in the province was 730,375. And for those students, we had 37,197 teachers, certificated teachers. This is information all available in the Government of Alberta budget documents. However, in today's budget, under Danielle Smith and the UCP, we'll have 766,280 students in Alberta classrooms. And for teachers, there are actually fewer than there were when Rachel was the Premier. There are only 37,039.
Hoffman says the ratio of students to teachers needs to improve in order to create a, quote, well-educated society to power our future economy. Well, the province announced a plan to reduce emissions while helping to grow the Alberta economy. Environment Minister Sonia Savage says that includes a plan to continue to support our energy sector and our electricity grid. She says the Made in Alberta plan will be quite comprehensive as we make our way to net zero emissions by the year 2050.
Includes establishing tables to incorporate youth and Indigenous insight into the implementation of this plan. We're looking at pathways to reduce methane emissions by 75 to 80% from 2030 levels by 2014 levels. The current target is 45% by 45% by 2025. We're looking at pathways to see if we can increase that. We're exploring reducing the oil sands emissions limit, the 100 megaton cap. We believe that can be lowered. We're investing $25 million from the Tier Fund into ERA to support hydrogen development. There's a huge opportunity to develop hydrogen, both domestically and internationally.
After the break, more about new carbon tax relief for Canadian food growers and innovative ways communities are working to not just attract doctors, but keep them in smaller Canadian communities. That's next. Keep it here. With spring springing up here in southern Alberta, farmers are getting onto their fields to start this year's crops. And thanks to a private member's bill, the carbon tax will not apply to the fuels needed for this year's farming activities. Earlier this week, Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas chatted with Hal Roberts to discuss a few important issues for those of us here in Alberta. Have a look.
Rachel, Canadian farmers are applauding the passage of Bill C-234. It exempts farm fuels from the federal government's carbon tax. How important is this really for our agricultural communities, especially here in southwestern Alberta?
Hal, I can only comment on what I'm hearing from farmers themselves. I think that's probably, the best voice to listen to. I know that this bill means a lot to them. So this bill comes from my colleague, Ben Waub, a Conservative member of Parliament here in the House of Commons who serves with me. It was his idea. He drove it forward and ultimately gained the support of the NDP and the Bloc, and we were successful in putting it through. That being the case, it is of tremendous benefit to farmers because we know that these are the men and women who work remarkably hard to serve our country, to make sure that we're fed, but not only us, but to make sure that the world is fed. And this is something to be celebrated. And unfortunately, we have a government that chooses not to. Instead, they like to put policies in place that are incredibly restrictive toward farmers, if not an outright attack, whether it's, regulations regarding fertilizer or the carbon tax. So the fact that, my colleague has been so successful in getting this bill through and farmers will now be exempt from the carbon tax being applied to their fuel, I think it's just a huge win for farmers. And certainly they've spoken out and given a significant endorsement of this legislation.
Let's talk about that carbon tax. Went up again April 1st. How damaging has it been for families across the country?
Yeah, and again, a very important question because we know that the carbon tax impacts all of us, whether it's our home heating or the cost of groceries that we're purchasing at the store, or the fuel that we put in our vehicles to drive to work or take our kids to sport practice. The carbon tax is applied to literally everything that we depend on in life in one form or another. The carbon tax is something that, this Liberal government is very committed to. They like to virtue signal that they care about the environment and therefore are applying this carbon tax. But yet when we look at the metrics, when we actually look at whether or not they're hitting the environmental targets that they've set for themselves, we see that they're not. They haven't met a single environmental target during their entire 8 years in government. So it's simply more rhetoric. And at the end of the day, it's purely punitive toward Canadians because it's not actually accomplishing, what it was supposed to be. So at the end of the day, we're huge proponents on our side of scrapping the carbon tax and putting practices in place that are common sense and that will actually make a real difference in terms of making sure that we're stewarding our earth.
Rachel, there's still a massive doctor shortage in many parts of our province, including here in Lethbridge. Now, the UCPs say they're bringing in 17 more doctors. 6 are apparently practicing here, another 11, I think, expected by the end of the year. How important is that working relationship between the federal and provincial governments to address physician shortages, not just here in Alberta, but across the country?
Mm-hmm. This is definitely a significant issue in our area and has been for a little while now. And so I was pleased to see that we have 17 doctors coming into the city of Lethbridge. I think there's an opportunity there for sure for provincial, federal, and municipal governments to work well together. In order to address the shortage, we do have to bring individuals in from other countries. One of the things that our city and province have been working really well on is actually to streamline that process. So making sure that credentials are honored and that where there is extra training or education needed, that it's delivered in a timely fashion. And so there was actually a recent article that came out not too long ago that actually was praising the city of Lethbridge for its approach and its partnership with the province on this matter. And this is actually a model that's being looked at in other places of the country. So it's this effect where you're basically cutting back on the red tape, you're streamlining the process, you're making sure that people are credentialed properly, and that anything that needs to be brought up to date is in a quick manner. What this does then is it allows individuals to start practicing quite quickly. The other thing that's happening within the city of Lethbridge in order to attract doctors is actually just a really personal approach. One might call it hospitality. So essentially wanting to talk about the good things about Lethbridge and all that it has to offer, especially to those who might be looking to raise a family in our city. And it seems to be attracting the type of people who want to be in a small urban center like ours rather than the larger ones. And so by attracting those individuals who are looking for that type of environment, it means that they're more likely to stay rather than us losing them in a few years once their contract comes to an end.
After the break, we speak with an education expert who shares the importance of techniques for reading and getting your kids off of those screens. That's next.